first job any F1 driver has is to...
That's ironic as well.
David Walker...
He's clearly a driver, not a walker. What's up, squad? It's your Squid. It's the first of the month, which means it's time for some Patreon requests. I'll show you who requested this one near the end of the video. I'll turn it up as well.
Driver who races an F1
Let's just get into it, right?
So bad they'll never be forgotten. Every driver who races an F1 will hope to have success, or at least make a mark on the sport in some way.
Yeah, you don't want to just be a one and done.
End up being memorable for all the wrong reasons. Fans these days love to hate on the likes of Lance Stroll or Pastor Maldonado for being bad, but compared to
well, I mean, they were on the podium.
List, Stroll might as well be Ayrton Senna. These 7 drivers were not only bad, but they had moments that genuinely made you wonder whether it was possible to do a worse job. Ide. At 31, Ide was quite old for a debutant when he joined the new Super Aguri team for 2006, but he had a decent racing background. Runner-up in the Japanese F3 and the highly...
Yeah, so he's no mug, that's alright.
Championship, a race winner in Super GT and French F3, and with a 5th place finish at the Macau GP, Ide obviously had plenty of talent. Unfortunately, none of this seemed to come with him to Formula 1. The season opener in Bahrain, Ide looked like he was struggling to even keep the car on the track. At one point, he corrected a slide so violently that his hand slipped off the steering wheel. He was almost 3 seconds slower than his teammate Sato in qualifying, and 7 seconds off Michael Schumacher's pace. Amazingly, he made it 33 laps into the race.
At least it wasn't 5 minutes.
Which was a blessing in disguise. Malaysia was a slight improvement, just 1.7 seconds behind Sato in qualifying, as he again retired with mechanical issues, but he seemed to take a step backwards in Australia. He spun a number of times in practice and became something of an obstacle to other drivers in qualifying.
Oh, that's rough.
He was almost
that's embarrassing.
4 seconds slower than Sato. If the 107% rule was around in 2006, he'd have failed to qualify twice. He finally managed to finish a race, however, 13th and last, 3 laps down, and a lap behind his teammate.
I mean, I'm lonely, it said.
And the next race at Imola was the last of those numbers. After qualifying 1.6 seconds behind Sato, on the first lap of the race, he ploughed into the side of the Midland of Christian Albert, pushing him into the gravel in a spectacular incident. Under the advice of the FIA, Super Aguri dropped Ide, and a few days later, the FIA took away Ide's super license.
Right, so the association just went, nah, you're shit, mate.
Probably fair. Taki Inoue. By results alone, Taki Inoue was poor. The qualifying gaps to his teammates were regularly measured in seconds rather than tenths. He only finished 5 of his 18 races, with retirements being a solid mix of spins and mechanical issues. But it's not the lack of speed that makes Inoue's career so legendarily awful. It was the unusual and comical incidents he seemed to find himself involved in. Let me give you a taster. During practice at Monaco, Inoue went off at Mirabeau, stalled the car and had to watch from the sidelines. After the session, he jumped back in and got back to the pits. As this was happening, French rally legend Jean Ragnotti was outspanking one of the course cars around the circuit. As he came through the swimming pool, he spotted Inoue being towed back to the paddock. But it was too late, and Ragnotti slammed into the back of the footwork. Inoue turned the wheel to avoid hitting the truck that was pulling him, causing the rope to effectively flip him upside down.
You idiot.
Although Inoue had the presence of mind to keep wearing his helmet, his seatbelts weren't done up.
You idiot!
He was okay. A fact he said he realised when his balls moved after the crash. If balls don't move, then there's a problem with brain damage, I think. Amazingly, that wouldn't be his last incident with the
Okay.
After breaking down from 18th place...
Yep, I guess that's a way. That's one way of looking at it, right? Also, the central heating just kicked on. I'll stop mentioning it in every video, but yeah, obviously I don't want the people in my house to freeze, so that's just something we're going to have to deal with, right?
The fire extinguisher from the side of the track, but as he ran back across the grass to his car, he was mown down by a course vehicle that had just arrived on the scene. After rolling across the bonnet, Inoue hopped...
Oh, I'm coming to help, and I'm going to run the driver over. What? Like...
He's early in the Hungarian GP. Inoue's footwork started to smoke. In an attempt to help out, he grabbed a fire extinguisher from the side of the track. But as he ran back across the grass to his car, he was mown down by a course vehicle that had just arrived on the scene.
Jesus, that's a good photo.
Inoue hopped a couple of times before collapsing on the floor. Apart from a slightly sore leg, he was fine, making the whole thing one of the most comical bloopers in F1 history.
Right, so it looked like a soccer injury.
Improved slightly as the season progressed, but a planned drive with Minardi in 1996 fell through when a sponsor pulled out. He's since embraced his status as a terrible driver, freely admitting that he wasn't good enough for F1 and joking about the unusual incidents that made his career.
Nice.
Jean-Denis Delatraz.
At least he's self-aware.
What is Delatraz doing? A classic line of Murray Walker commentary from the Nürburgring in 1995.
What is Delatraz doing?
F1 career. Delatraz drove 3 races in F1. The 1994 Australian GP for Larousse.
Have a look at that, like
the
the
Portuguese and European GP.
looks like a pubis mundus. I think that's what they're called.
Delatraz drove 3 races in F1. The 1994 Australian GP for Larousse and the Portuguese and European
curve on the
1995
thing there.
Pacific. And by all accounts, were rather terrible. In qualifying for Australia, he was 3.2 seconds slower than his teammate and was a staggering 10 laps down when his gearbox gave out after 56 laps. With the Pacific team also in dire need of cash towards the end of 1995, Delatraz had another chance.
How do you be an F1 team and be broke?
Even worse. He was 12 seconds off of the pole time in Portugal, and over
12 seconds not too bad.
The next fastest driver. In the race, he was 7 seconds slower than anyone else.
But it's not too bad.
After just 7 laps, and retired after 14 laps with cramp. Yes,
wow.
You heard that right. Cramp. His final outing was barely any better.
What, do you have his period or something? Like, fucking...
10 laps down when his gearbox gave out after 56 laps. With the Pacific team also in dire need of cash towards the end of 1995, Delatraz had another chance, but if anything, he was even worse. He was 12 seconds off of the pole time in Portugal and over 5 seconds slower than the next fastest driver. In the race, he was several seconds slower than anyone else, lapped after just 7 laps, and retired after 14 laps with cramp. Yes, you heard that right.
Cramps. Like, don't get me wrong, I have a hiatal hernia, right? Which, you know, there's a screenshot. Google it if you want to know more and stuff. But, like, I understand. Like, cramping and stuff, that's bad and stuff. But surely if you're an elite sports person, you sort of just fucking deal with it, you know? Like, or try to anyway. 14 laps in.
Delatraz at least finished this race, albeit in 15th, and last 7 laps down. And that was it for Delatraz's F1 career. A failed payment saw him replaced for the rest of the year, while his lack of pace prompted F1 to introduce the 107% qualifying rule.
Nice.
Although his time in F1 was laughable, Delatraz went on to be much more successful in sports cars, twice winning his class at Le Mans.
Good on him.
Alpes.
Oh, he won his class at Le Mans, that's alright.
It's a reasonably uncommon occurrence, and usually only happens because a car...
What language was that on the back of that old mate's jersey?
Twice winning
Is that Russian?
At Le Mans. Alpes. Being disqualified from a race is a reasonably uncommon...
Like, on the left there, is that Russian? I think it's Russian. I could be wrong.
Occurrence, and usually only happens because a car has breached technical regulations. Not this time, however. He's entered his home race 3 times in the late 1960s without success.
Unfortunate.
The last of those occasions in 1969,
nice old school car.
One of the most unusual and embarrassing disqualifications in F1 history. He was too slow.
It happens. It happens.
He's had only completed 22 laps of the Canadian Grand Prix.
22 laps?
Of leader Jackie Stewart. It also been
oh wow, he looks different young, doesn't he? Last video I did, I saw an older Jackie Stewart in his nice little golf cap type thing there. Like, that's the same dude. I mean, how many racing car drivers are there called Jackie Stewart? Like, of course it's the same fucking dude. You're an idiot, Julian. But yeah, my biological name's not Squid, funnily enough. But yeah, he looks like, I mean, he's obviously had his style since he was very young, you know? Like, he's got his hat, he's got his big sunnies and stuff and whatnot. But yeah, he looks like a different person, you know? Time does that, I suppose. 50 years.
Something of an obstruction on the track, pushing other cars off the circuit and getting in the way of the leaders. After almost wiping Stewart out of the lead, Ken Tyrrell went to the stewards and demanded peas be black flags. The protest worked, and the 48-year-old Canadian became the only person in F1 to be disqualified from a race for driving too slowly.
That's a record you don't want to have, isn't it?
Ross's career
That's rough.
Have been as bad as it was. In 1995, he was a runner-up in his debut year in Formula 3000, a forerunner of today's Formula 2, earning him an F1 drive with Footwork the following year.
Footwork, that's an interesting team name for a car, isn't it?
See why he's made this list. He failed
it's clearly the tyres, not the footwork.
Drive with Footwork the following year. Looking at Ross's efforts in 1998, however, you can see why he's made this list. He failed to qualify for 5 races, while teammate TORA TAKAGI was more than capable of mixing it with the Minardis, Prosts, Arrows and Stewarts.
Okay.
When he did qualify, he was a lot less incident-prone than he'd been in 1996.
Interesting.
With one notable exception. Anyone
what
remember
happened?
The colossal 14-car collision at a wet spot?
No, but I'll have to look it up. If somebody can link me in the comment section, that would be amazing.
A good few seconds after the bulk of the accident had already happened, ploughed into the carnage at full speed.
Mr. Player.
He was that driver. That somehow wasn't the worst moment either. That would be Monaco.
Alright.
In attempting to qualify, which he obviously failed to do, he had an off mirror boat. He got going from that, only to have a spin in the second part.
Central heating again.
Somehow it would be Monaco.
It's like every time it turns off, there's like two big bangs, and I think it's the metal expanding or contracting because of the heat, but who knows?
In attempting to qualify, which he obviously failed to do, he had an off at mirror boat. He got going from that, only to have a spin in the second part of the swimming pool. Somehow he not only didn't hit anything, but had kept the engine running.
Oh wow, good on you, mate.
He do a spin turn to get back pointing the right way. He messed that up too. He ended up stranded on the curb on the inside of the corner at a marshal's post. Embarrassing. Even his own team were fed up with him. After the incident, his mechanics reportedly rearranged the letters of the name on his scooter so that it spelt the word tosser.
Oh,
it must have been
okay.
Incredibly tough.
He mustn't have been very popular in the rooms.
Doing enough with your own performance is bad enough.
That's full on.
Clearly didn't want him. Can't have made it an easy environment to be in.
Yeah, exactly.
David Walker. The first job any F1 driver has is to beat.
That's ironic as well.
David Walker,
he's clearly a driver, not a walker.
He was Emerson Fittipaldi's teammate in 1972 when Emo became F1's youngest world champion. Walker, he didn't even score a single point. A unique achievement
in the same
for
car.
a full-time teammate of a world champion.
That's funny.
In his 10 races that season, Walker
it's not the machine, bruh.
Lower 5 times and had a best grid slot of 12th. Fittipaldi had taken 3 poles.
That's a fancy-looking old-school car, isn't it?
Things were barely any better in the races either.
Square and boxy.
9th in Spain. He regularly ended up finishing laps behind his teammates. Of course, it wasn't all as straightforward as Walker simply being bad. Lotus boss Colin Chapman was notorious for putting his focus on a single driver to the detriment of the others. And Walker was no different. It was a vicious cycle. The worse Walker performed, the less attention was placed on him.
Yeah, but that's a chicken or the egg type thing, isn't it? Like...
Claudio Langes. There are a ton of...
You know, were you shit and it changed his mind first, or did he change his mind and then you became shit? Like...
Do worse, and so on.
Chicken and the egg, you know?
Claudio Langes. There are a ton of drivers from the late 1980s and early 1990s.
Cars look wider back then.
Failures to qualify for races on the record. Many of whom also had experience with the dreaded...
The dreaded what? Pre-qualifying. What's that?
Qualifying. Back then, F1
Alright, I don't get that joke.
Teams and drivers that it wouldn't be possible for them all to be accommodated for an entire race weekend. So any new teams or teams that had performed poorly previously had to run the gauntlet of pre-qualifying.
Yeah, what's that?
Held on the Friday morning before the main practice sessions, the 4 fastest cars would be allowed to take part in the main qualifying session, while everyone else's weekend would be over before it even started.
Right, isn't that just qualifying?
His entire F1 career consisted of only pre-qualifying sessions.
Wow.
He was hopelessly slow at all 14 events. He was always faster than the drivers from the Life team, but that car was so bad that it would have struggled to compete in F3000, let alone F1.
Alright.
Ignore Life and occasionally the similarly terrible Subaru-powered Coloni, Langes was always the slowest driver in pre-qualifying by a significant margin.
Alright, that's unfortunate.
His teammate Roberto Moreno was 5.7 seconds. Yeah, you heard me right. The team collapsed with 2 races left to run in the season, taking Langes' career, if you can call it that, with it. Langes holds the unbelievable record of the most race entries without ever managing to start one. Have we missed out any drivers that you...
That is pretty embarrassing.
Let us know.
Most without being able to get in there. I've tried several times and couldn't get in. Fair enough. Yeah, that is embarrassing. That's interesting. Let me know in the comments section. Below who you think the worst driver of all time was, or who you think the driver, who the driver is for you that was so bad you can't forget them, you know, like as you were growing up or as you were first interested in F1 and all that sort of jazz. That was a really good suggestion. I'm pretty sure it was Bob. I could be wrong though. I will circle the name of the patron that it was. I've got a lot of Bobs, so it's a fucking good guess to say Bob, because it could be 3 different people on that list, right? Or 4, really, if you include the Robs and the Roberts. But yeah, anyway, thanks heaps for suggesting this, guys. If you want to suggest a video as well, I do guaranteed reactions for $5. I mean, if you want to just leave the suggestion in the comments section, I might react to it as well. But it'll be guaranteed I'll do it if you give me $5. I like money. Turning some of yours into mine on a monthly basis would be ideal. I do that with these Mad Dogs money. They voluntarily give it to me just like you could voluntarily give it to me. The link is in the description. I'm going to film a bunch today. I've got a bunch of Patreon requests to film. Plus, I also want to do a multi-parter to that video about Talladega. So, stay tuned if you haven't watched it yet. And, yeah, we'll watch it together. Anyway, I'll see you guys when I look at you. You'll see me when you look at me. Thanks heaps for watching.